Hi, I'm Hannah.
Hi, I'm Abby.
And this is Spilling Ink,
the Inksville podcast.
We are here with season 4, episode 3.
Yeah, final season, halfway through the midpoint.
Zooming through it this season, aren't we?
Yeah, it's been magical. Like, it's just great.
Yeah, I think we've got a really good kind of diverse mix of guests last season and this season. Because again, I mean, skipping ahead a little bit, but we're talking a little bit about theatre again today, which is nice, isn't it?
It's really, really nice to have it. And next week, which we can sort of allude to.
Yes.
I'll tell more at the end of the episode, which I'm really looking forward to. Not with theatre, but with something different. But yeah, it's just wonderful. I think this season, I don't know about you, but I really do feel quite like, I feel relaxed. I feel like this is the time where the leaves are literally falling off the trees.
Yes.
We are lit by the autumn light. It's wonderful.
It is.
And
it's nice. It feels like a reflective time of year, so it's nice to speak to people and reflect with them about kind of what they've set up, what they're kind of what they've done. And we had that with Matt last week, didn't we? And we're going to do the exact same thing this week with Helen, but we will get to that shortly.
Yeah, just to touch on Matt quickly, he was great. That was such a wonderful conversation to have.
Yeah.
I know we both came away, we recorded that before an ink spill session, and I feel like it's so funny because we're both knackered at the minute. I feel like maybe we said that a lot. We both feel quite tired. But it was so nice to kind of go away, that energy that he gave us, poetry for people and building communities and engaging people. It was so nice to kind of take that into it's your final ink spill before.
It was my final
ink
spill. It was, it was an emotional night.
It was. I didn't cry though. You proud of me?
Yeah, I am proud of you actually. Yeah, it wasn't quite as emotional as I thought it was going to be, which I'm glad about because that kind of stuff makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like I just don't like fuss. I've always hated fuss, and I just if I've had a lot of fuss recently, and I actually quite liked the fact that everyone was like, right, well, go push that baby out, and we'll see you soon. I was like, yeah, cool, great.
Which I got the other side of it, which is people being like, we love Hannah, she's great, we love the work she does, we're really gonna miss her.
People have been nice.
And then you were like, no one told me this, and I was like, oh.
I think that's more of a me thing though. I think as a person, I don't really, I don't know. How do I want to say it? Like they would never come forward to me to say that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm the noisy, emotional, bouncy thing in the corner, and you're much more like calm and still.
Potentially, I don't know, but yeah, it was a really nice ink spill to end on. But it definitely did feel like people were presenting really interesting poetry last night that felt very poetry for the people vibes, quite political. We were talking about harvest as well, weren't we? And how harvest has changed from being something that was very community based and community led to something completely different now. And I think that kind of got people a bit supercharged to talk about the fact that we need to give things back to the people, get the people back together. Yeah, so it's nice. It
was really good, and it was nice to have Matt beforehand. And last week was just, it's gone so fast. So we're back here again, ready to talk about Helen. Well, ready to talk to Helen. But before that, should we touch on our creative tasks for last week?
Definitely. What was your creative task? What did you set for us?
I set that I was focused on the writing for people, not for poets. I think that really jingled my jammies and set something buzzing inside me.
Jingled your jammies.
I know, it's a YouTuber.
Get that on a t-shirt.
She says it all the time, but she does it in ASMR, so she's like, jingles my jammies. And it just makes me laugh. I don't know why. I don't know. Your face then
What's
was
a jammy?
I don't know.
I thought they were pyjamas.
Maybe just like, I don't know. But it just makes me laugh. Anyway, it really resonated with me. Much more academic than
Jingle your jammies.
yeah, she's American, if you can tell, but I love it. So I was looking at my poems and 3 poems from other people and why, if they captured people, and why they might not have we're basically analysing if they were written for people, for poets. So I think I mentioned last week, I feel like there's a lot of times I'm sat in a room where I'm like, that poem's gone down really well here because that's a room full of poetry people. Well, there's nothing wrong with that because writing your audience is important, but I think it's nice to have that distinction. So for my poems, I won't go into like too much, but like the one I really focused on is this is a passenger announcement, which is trigger warning it's about mental health and suicide. And I love this poem. I've read it a lot. I think it definitely, I think, I don't know about you, I don't think poems are ever fully done. I think you always inherently tweak stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But it normally goes down really well. But I performed it in the summer in a slam in Liverpool. And I always do a content warning before because it's a hard poem. And it used to make me cry when I was performing, which was quite hard because it's quite wordy. And this woman was really upset with me afterwards.
Really?
Yeah, really, really upset. She basically felt that I shouldn't have performed it because I was giving basically inspiration to people in the room for how to kill themselves.
What?
And I was stunned because I've been performing for about 3 years now, and I've never had this reaction. And I was the only one that gave a content warning at night, and there were other topics that came up that I thought deserved quite triggering and deserved a content warning. And it's really like I was really like upset about this because she was upset but shouting at me in a room full of people, and it really caught me off guard.
Wow.
And I like took myself to the bathroom, and like it was really weird because I had a few people be like, "Oh, your poem was great," and I was just like, and I had like tears in my eyes, and they're like, "Do you okay?" And I was like, I literally had to go hide myself away. And the organisers were wonderful when I told them and I let them know this had happened, and they were really reassuring. And luckily, and I mean this in a good way, I didn't go through to the second round, so it was in Liverpool, so I could just get a train back and go home. But it really shook me, so I really wanted to look at it through this lens of like, am I writing for people or poets? And
that's awful. Sorry, I just didn't know you had to go through that.
Yeah.
But I want to just stick on it for a bit. That's yeah, horrendous, because that is one of my favourite poems that you've written, and it touches so many people in the room, because I think we're all guilty of the message of that poem of actually, you know, oh, my train's been delayed, my train's been cancelled, what an inconvenience, and then we realise actually what the poem's about and what's happened. Oh God, that's terrible.
Yeah, it really caught me off guard, and I've sort of mentioned it to a few people I sort of know from various parts of the scene, and everyone, yeah, they're all really reassuring, say you did the right thing, but you don't feel you did the right thing, because if you did the right thing, they wouldn't have been that upset. But I couldn't have not. It's a good poem, and it's an important poem. So for those who don't know, I might say not everyone knows my poem. It's Hannah alluded to. It's basically the experience of being on a train that's delayed, and the reason it's delayed is because someone has killed themselves, and various people responding to that. And I'm very passionate about this poem, and I think, like I said, I've always want to tweak it, but yeah, I think it's a good poem. So that's why I wanted to read this and be like, is it for people or is it for poets? And I think it's for people. I think it's got quite a loose rhyme scheme. It's much more of like a narrative sort of storytelling vibe, and it's an important thing that we need to talk about. You know, there used to be like a code word for like you know, people being on the tracks and people dying like that. And I think they just say it now. I've seen it on like boards in stations, like due to people being hit by a train or and I'm just like, we don't have that like shield of it anymore, and like there's not a veil as much. So I really wanted to like highlight it and show the human experience. And that poem was originally it was about 5 minutes originally, and I've cut a lot out of it. So yeah, that was the poem of mine I focused on, and also took a time sort of like, is there anything I can do with it? I thought, no, actually there isn't. I think I'm really sorry if this woman had listened. Like, I am sorry I upset her, but I did everything I could. I always leave a break as well and say, you know, please, my line is, please take the space you need if this poem is affecting you, whatever that means for people. So yeah, I did that one, and then I did look at Rupi Kaur. I looked at Milk and Honey, because I think I mentioned last week it's 10 years since Milk and Honey got published, and I think I said last week, and I think I say it again, she definitely writes for people, not poets, and that's why there's a lot of literary criticism surrounding her work. But at the end of the day, it affects people. And I think there's a real, you know, people are upset that poetry's been made digestible, but at the end of the day, if that's what people can consume and therefore engage and maybe read more and actually buy poetry and then go into poetry sections to find Milk and Honey because they recognise a name that's not something that we're taught at school like John Donne or Shakespeare, they might therefore pick up another book with a great looking cover and risk looking inside. It's like these little things that, like, if this is an entryway for people, why shouldn't they enjoy it? Yeah. And you're not make anyone read more poetry by telling them that the poetry they enjoy is not good enough. So it was really interesting, and I think I'm going to add it into like my editing process. And maybe my reflection from submitting is like, is this written for people? And then when I submit for like poetry magazines, it has to be written for poets. You know, that's what poets buy poetry magazines. But if I'm putting stuff online, maybe that's where I need to look at the lens of like, am I sharing this for people because I want people to enjoy this? Yeah. So it was really good. It was really, really useful, actually.
Sounds like a very reflective task.
It was very reflective.
I do think it's worth noting though that, you know, we are going to write poetry that people are going to disagree with, and I think that's how, you know, you're doing it right, actually. If you're encouraging people to have a reaction. Obviously we don't want it to be a negative reaction, we don't want to upset people, but at the same time, I don't know, you're not going to please everyone. Not
No.
everyone is gonna, take the same meaning from a poem.
Was like Matt said once was it Matt last week who said when it goes out into the world, I'm not there to give it the explanation.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just
In the
out there for people.
preamble,
The
yeah.
preamble, yeah. I was like, that's exactly it.
Yeah. But it is frustrating when you get people like that who don't see poetry as a universal thing. They take a very kind of subjective view on it and then make that subjective view known. And in actual fact, there's a much greater message there. People aren't stupid. People know how suicide happens.
Yeah.
That's not you encouraging it, but then also educating people on how to commit suicide. That's just simply not the case with that poem. And she's missed a much greater message there, which I think is frustrating. But I suppose that is something you can reflect on maybe to see how was that message missed. But honestly, sometimes people just do that. They just...
Yeah, it's like I say, I've been performing 3 years, it's never happened before, and I always do a content warning. Even in slams, even if they don't give you extra time for it, I always say this references, and when we put this podcast out, I'll put a note on. Because it's important. People, this is an entirely different podcast, but something to talk about is like content warnings and trigger warnings, and people saying that takes away from art. It does not. Art is supposed to be affecting, but also people deserve to be protected.
Yeah, God, yeah.
So
it's interesting as well because obviously I've talked in the past that I used to be a musician, and it's been interesting for me to see whenever I'd come off stage, as I was always we were in a folk band and I was we were a female fronted folk band. It was like that super fricative, that was our selling point.
Yeah.
And you would always get somebody come over at the end to give you an assessment of your performance and how it could be better. And I used to get that every single gig, every single show. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I was a woman, if it's because I was young. I don't know why people felt that they could come and dissect my performance in that way.
Probably both.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's obviously the same thing. It must be just any kind of performative thing. People just think they can come and give their 2 pence on it when you haven't asked for it. Which it's probably something maybe we could have talked about more in the last season when you're putting your work out there, how to deal with that criticism, because you're going to get it, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean that's what this season's reflects. So I guess I mean, could quickly just touch on it is how do we deal with criticism, because writing is so incredibly vulnerable.
It is,
and performing it is putting yourself out there, and
it's sad as well, isn't it? Because my answer to that is it's something you get used to. You get used to
skin.
These kind of like almost like bitch slaps. Like I remember when I got my first piece of criticism on my novel, I was just I cried afterwards. I was in central Manchester. We used to do it as part of our master's degree. We'd sit around in a circle and critique each other's work, and we'd gone around the rest of the room and everyone had got really lovely, positive, glowy feedback. And then I was, I think, towards the end, and they just ripped mine to shreds. And I was like, have you given everyone else such lovely feedback and I've got this absolute shitstorm? And I remember walking to Oxford Road train station and just crying my eyes out and being like, why the hell am I here? Why did I sign up to this masters? I'm clearly not good enough. But then you get a thick skin to it because you get criticism so much as an author and a writer, and you do, you become numb to it eventually, and you get to then cherry pick the criticism you take on board and you act on. And
absolutely. I think that's the thing is you get thicker skin, but you also choose who you need to hear this from. And who is entitled to give that. And like everyone can have their opinion, but you don't need to act on all of them.
Absolutely.
At all.
If I respect someone else as a writer and their integrity and their kind of almost their what do I want to say, where that criticism is coming from, if they're if they're just being critical rather than constructive, I find that really annoying, and I've had that quite a bit. But in actual fact, if they're a genuinely really good writer who I respect and who I can tell are giving me these prompts because they want me to do better and they think they can see potential, I don't mind that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's totally fine. It's good for you to have that like lens. I've said lens a few times, but have that lens, have that.
Well, you've got a pair of new lenses on, my love. I feel like we need to talk about that in the podcast. I've just got some new specs and it looks great.
It's only people are watching it. Yeah, my eyesight's gone a bit wonky, so we're trying it out. I'm not sure if I like them. I've it's a weird one, but thank you. I like it. Got a lot of. I haven't told you about this last week at Inksville. I got a load of feedback, and there was lots of very nice ones from people who know the nice things. But then Ian, I know it was jokingly, but he has such a good poker face. Just went, they don't suit you.
Oh, really?
And it absolutely like got me until he smiled. I was like, oh my God, Ian, sir, please.
Oh, was he joking?
He was joking, but
he's not much of a joker then, so I think I'd
he's
have
so
been a bit like,
wicked.
oh.
He really threw me off. It was so funny. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, haha. I was like, oh, Ian, yeah, joker.
Oh, my boy.
But yes, yeah, got some new specs. But nice, not propagating, procrastinating. How was your creative task?
Oh yeah, so my creative task last week was about not being comfortable, wasn't it? And seeing if you could
very
mix
funny
up.
9 months pregnant saying don't be comfortable.
I'm already very uncomfortable, thank you. So I don't need to make more further discomfort. But I found it really interesting to reflect on the poems I've been writing recently. So I didn't talk about it in relation to the novel because I feel like you do have to get comfortable in novel writing. You need to get comfortable in the story, the characters, the place. So I didn't want to take myself out of that feeling of comfort. So I thought I'd apply it to poetry instead. And I have found that I have definitely fallen into a trap of my comfort topics, if that makes sense, my comfort subjects. And I seem to just write about the same things at the moment because they're the things that I'm particularly inspired by. But at the same time, I'm getting a bit bored of writing about them.
Yeah, it's totally fair enough.
So I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge that I seem to just be going to the same like content.
Is it like countryside, nature?
No, I don't really write about that at all. It's actually more about how pissed off I am about war.
That's what springs to mind when I think of you is like lots of nature imagery, but around angry things.
I started out, I would say, very nature based, but these days now it's all about how much like war and the refugee, like, everything. Just it's all rolled into one, and it makes me angry. I think I've become very like political since obviously I'm going to be having a child, and I think about the world this child's going to be born into, and I'm getting angry on his behalf.
Good, be angry.
But yeah, so I think that's it. I really want to I've not really had a chance to do it this week, but I'm really interested in maybe redrafting 1 or 2 of my poems to and giving them to my students. I think that would be really good.
Oh, that'd be fun.
And getting them to
they're going to be honest.
They will be honest, yeah, but actually I think I need that. I think that'd be really interesting for me to see what they come up with. And I think if it's me as well, I don't know, because I get on really well with my students. I just have lovely relationships with them. That sounds strange, but
in a good safeguarding
sense, non-toxic way. I have a very healthy relationship with the kids I teach. But yeah, I think they'd enjoy giving me feedback and ripping them to pieces. So that's what I'm going to work on now. I'm going to try redraft some poems to make them child friendly. I've never written anything for a child before.
You have a lot of practice soon.
For little Herb, but yeah, we'll see if that's something that I enjoy doing. Yeah, because I don't know. I wonder if I'll get as much fulfillment out of that. We'll see.
Yeah, I love that. Shall we introduce this week's guest?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm really excited. Helen is a friend of my partner's who I met up in Edinburgh, and I had a lovely time seeing one of her shows, and it's gonna be. It was another guest where I was just like, this makes sense. This is gonna be a good one. Yeah. So I'll read her bio, and then we'll go have a chat.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Helen is a writer, actor, comedian and activist, co-director of the theatre company Lung, through which she has spent the last 10 years making socially driven plays with and about different communities across the UK. Her play E15 won 4 awards from the National Student Drama Festival and toured England with Battersea Arts Centre's touring network. Her play Trojan Horse won the 2019 Amnesty International Freedom of Expression Award and a Fringe First before opening the new Leeds Playhouse. So I'd seen that, but I didn't actually go. I saw it advertised, didn't go see it, unfortunately. Okay. More's pity. Her most recent production, The Children's Inquiry, opened this summer at Southwark Playhouse and received 5-star reviews in The Stage and What's on Stage. Helen's acting credits include Jermaine in Channel 4's Raised by Wolves, Susanna Shakespeare in BBC's Upstart Crow, Colette in Inside Number 9's episode Zanzibar, and Maya Einstein in 21st Century's Genius. So, she's been busy.
She has, yeah. I mean, I didn't even realise, but I will have definitely seen Helen in something then because I really like Inside Number 9.
There you go.
But that's, we're dealing with, we're about to chat with someone who's done an absolute ton of stuff, so there's going to be a lot to unpick here, isn't there?
It's going to be great. Okay, should we go say hello?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So we are welcoming the wonderful Helen Monks. It's so lovely to have you here with us this morning.
So good to have you here and to see so many books behind you. That's so nice.
Yes, that wasn't what Alex was saying when we moved house recently, when there was like suitcases of books being like manually dragged into the house. But it's a good
backdrop, isn't it?
Yeah.
We at my theatre company we're published with, well, it used to be Oberon and then it closed down, and they said when they closed down we could go and take as many plays as we wanted to.
Amazing.
But we'd not thought about the fact that plays, it's like when you think water hasn't got any weight to it and you fill up a big bottle of water. It was exactly the same. We took like 2 massive suitcases, and then I've never had such a horrific journey across London trying to get these suitcases. The wheels broke off both of them. I think I developed muscles, just in that 45 minute. It was horrendous, but have loads of free plays now, so don't think I'll ever be able to read all of them.
No, but what a delicious problem to have, really. Especially in your work.
It's really existential. I look at them and I think there's more words than there is time left in my life.
Yes. Yes.
So I can count down my days through the plays,
Yeah. That'd be a really fun roundup to have from you, like which ones you sort of crack the spine on and get into, and which ones you put to one side. Yeah. I can feel Hannah wincing when I say crack the spine there.
I actually loved because I opted to study quite a few modules in drama and playwriting at uni, and I loved it because you can kind of sit down and read a play within 2 hours, can't you? It's like a quick burst of inspiration. So I always used to love I'm jealous. I don't own enough plays on my bookshelf. I need to up my play game, my drama game.
You know, I'm the same with poetry though. It's why I like poetry so much, because I think if you're feeling really lazy but you just want like a little literary shot, then they're so much shorter, and you feel like you can read a whole poetry book. To properly absorb it, you probably need to spend a bit longer than an hour, but you can in theory if you're just being capitalist about it and trying to get from A to B. You can eat them up.
Trying to reach your Goodreads goal by like reading I'm like 15 books behind, so I pick loads of like short stories and poetry collections to like get back on track.
That's cheating.
Just a little bit, but it counts. I'm going to say it counts.
Yeah, it counts, definitely.
But lovely. So should we get started by asking you to introduce yourself and your work in your own words?
Yeah, I find this horrific because I realised when I was thinking about how to introduce myself that I'm a bit of a, it's not evil, that's the wrong word, but I create different versions. We all do it, don't we, depending on who we're talking to. And I think particularly in the arts, like everything is really categorized. So like if I'm talking about my acting, then I purely talk about my acting. Or if I'm talking about the theatre company that I run, I purely talk about that. So to talk about it holistically, I don't know if I've not done that in a really long time, but hello, I'm Helen. I would say I'm a writer, actor, failed comedian, and activist. I found some writing that I did when I was a teenager the other day, and it said my ambition in life was to be a failed comedian and a poet not appreciated in her own time. And I feel like I've done 50% of those things, so I'm halfway there.
That's pretty impressive.
And the way I guess that sort of manifests in my like daily working life is I act when people will employ me to act. So I've mostly kind of done sitcoms and comedies, and then a couple of seriously things and a few plays. And then my writing mostly is through my theatre company, Lung, where we write verbatim plays. So plays that are taken from interviews that we do with people, sort of trying to capture real life stories in people's real words. But then I started as a poet at the age of 11. I was poet laureate, Birmingham's Young Poet Laureate, and I look back now and I'm so embarrassed about my poems, but then I try and remind myself that I was 11 years old, so it's okay. But so I guess I'm a poet not appreciated in my own time, because I do still write poetry, but very much in my notes folder on my phone rather than showing anybody, because it's such a vulnerable, exposing thing. I much prefer getting other people to say things in a character on stage. That's kind of how my writing mostly manifests. So that's me, and it wasn't as horrific as I thought it would be. So yay.
Yeah, it was really lovely. My parents do listen to the podcast, so when they ask about the guests, they often are like, how do we relate to them? And when I mentioned your role in Upstart Crow, they were like, yes, we know who that is.
Yeah,
that's really nice.
Oh, that's so nice. It's funny, I feel like with the different like TV shows that I've been in, it's like, I don't know, you get such niche things of people who are really, really know about it. So with Upstart Crow, which is a comedy about William Shakespeare, and I play Susanna Shakespeare, so Shakespeare's daughter, and I just did a show in Stratford earlier this year at the RSC, and I've never been so famous in that because you get free entry into all of Shakespeare's houses, and because a lot of people who work there and volunteer there, I could hear them on their tours talking about the show Upstart Crow, which like I feel like you've either seen it or you haven't. And so then I would sort of put my hood up, or sometimes I'd pull my hood down and go hello. Yeah, which is we'll say hi to your mum and dad. That's fun.
Will. Yeah, no, it was really nice because when a lot of the other guests we've had from like the scenes I'm able to go, they're from this event, or I've known them from this. And it was just really nice to actually relate to them and be like, this is who I'm talking to. So it was really nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
But yeah, lovely. Did you have to follow up?
Yeah, just loads to unpick as well. So I think this is going to be a real good kind of chat today. I think the first thing I wanted to kind of pick up on, it's a term that is widely used, but just for anyone listening who might not be familiar, what is verbatim theatre? What does that kind of mean to you?
Yeah, great question. So we always describe the company as campaign-led verbatim theatre, which makes it sound so wanky and pretentious. But yeah, I'll start. Verbatim is a great way in. It essentially means word for word. And it's a big umbrella term, and I think particularly in theatre, it's a big umbrella term that there isn't kind of one way of doing it, but I can talk about the way we like to do it. I actually, as a form, think it can be just incredibly boring because you essentially interview people and then you word for word take the things that they say and turn them into a show. And that can often lead to people who have gone through something or experienced something and have processed it, being really reflective and talking in the past tense. And so they've almost gone on the emotional journey that you're trying to recreate on stage, because stage is all about recreating an emotional journey. And so verbatim can be like a block to that because they've done it for you, and then they're telling you the summary. It's like the AI notes at the end of a meeting. But the way we do it is we work with a specific group of people for a really long amount of time. It can be months and sometimes years. I think we worked out our average project takes about 4 years to create, which makes me 100, but they overlap. They intersect and overlap. And we often come with the kind of theme first. So it will be something like social housing or prisons, or the last one we did was about the social care system for children. So then we want a way in that's working with the people that are like living that and directly experiencing that. So maybe an example is the last show that we did was working with young people in the care system, mostly in foster care, and we ended up working with them for 5 years, which, bless them, we've been in their lives for like their whole childhood. We're like, hello, we're not leaving. But we would do weekly workshops, and through that we would interview them, but also play creative games, and the words that they said would form the script, but in a way that is really in consultation with them. So how they want to share their story or their messages with the world. And we use verbatim as a form. I don't know, I always think it's important I love form in writing. I always come with form first because it's so strict and sets parameters that I think then actually allow you loads of flexibility in terms of like what you want to say, what voices you want to be capturing. And verbatim, because it's such a strict form, has then allowed us to push that form. So the last show we did, it was a musical. We set it all to music. And the show before that, again, it sounds really wanky, but it was a dance piece. So we recorded the verbatim by actors as almost like an audio play. And then the actors, we ended up casting more dancers really on stage, dancing to the music. But it's all to tell the stories of real people with their real words.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that sounds brilliant. Well, I mean, on that note then, so the theatre company, Lung, that you co-direct, you've described it as a campaign-led verbatim theatre company. So you've kind of answered that really. What does it mean in practice? So it's putting real life, real experiences on the stage, but in a way that is kind of accessible then to everyday people. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, and I think that the campaign-led coming first is important because the form is verbatim as a way in, but I think, like I said, the kind of subject matter always comes first. And I think, I don't know, that's the thing that I have to offer, I guess, is writing. I'd like to think I can write, and so we're looking at like how different stories can shape the way that we see the world, and in practice, I guess how it looks is. Yeah, we work with those people for a long amount of time, but also around that is genuinely what are we trying to change? And it might be small change. It's that we're working with a group who by meeting every week and by getting to know us, like we all change each other in that small way. Or it might be with a lot of our plays, we have like a really specific ask. So at the moment, we did a play that was about prisons, but particularly death in prisons. And in a specific prison called Wood Hill, there's a really high suicide rate. So we've been working with the families who've lost loved ones in that prison. And a huge thing that they want to campaign for at the moment is IPPs, which are indefinite prison sentences, which have actually been banned, but the people who are serving IPPs in prison remain. And so there's a lot of campaign work already happening and already out there about those sentences. And I guess it's like how can the arts and how can our small corner of the world help that in some way. So we see the campaign led as being the kind of most important thing, and then the verbatim is like the way in. So the thing that we have to offer is we've made this show, we've worked with these people, they have a lot to say, we sort of support in how to get them as much exposure as possible and to be involved in those campaigns, because I think often campaigns are kind of about things rather than about the people and led by the people that are most impacted. So that's our kind of main drive is those connections, those human connections with the people that are at the sharp end of some sort of social issue, and genuinely hearing their voices and their experiences, but also us hearing that, like, what do they want to change and how can we help them to be a part of that change.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
it's really nice because I saw Wood Hill last year at the Edinburgh Fringe, which is where we met for the first time, which Alex, my partner, hadn't given me any context for. He was just like, my friend Helen is doing a play, I'm going to go see it. And he was very generous last year. He let me do a lot of picks, and I think he was like, this is my pick, and it was great. And I went and he gave me a thing, and it was harrowing. And it's so interesting hearing you say about like the choreography and the dancing that you had for your most recent play, when I felt that Wood Hill was incredibly choreographed. There was the set, I said to Alex, I was like, can I take a picture of the set? Because it was so interesting. It was these like filing cabinets, these brown boxes, and it was it 3 actors?
Yeah, well, it was 3 actors, and then the 4th was sort of playing the ghost, which was the kind of personification, I guess, of their loved one on stage. Yeah, and it's horrendous watch. This is the thing. I was like not flying for the show because I was like, if you're having a bad time, it's really tough. And not all of our shows are like that. Like they're not all like super like hard to watch. But that one definitely was, and that came from the group where it was so tough, but they basically wanted to try and give a glimpse into the experience of grief. That was their big aim, was to try and make people feel a fraction of how it felt. And that's such a big kind of ask of audiences, but also a real ask creatively of, you can speak and explain in words till you're blue in the face about how something felt, but the best way really is to just try and access that somehow in people viscerally, I guess. And so there was this huge audio soundscape, and there was so much movement. A lot of the piece was danced, and they talk about this kind of feeling of silence within the system of prison, and how that felt like screaming and nobody listening. So we wanted to make those actors voiceless on stage, which is why it was all voice recorded, but they were silent. And I think we could have potentially stripped the words out. I mean, Matt, who wrote it, would be grumpy with me if he heard me say this, but like the movement was so about trying to tap into how it feels, because we're bombarded with stats and why we should care about things, and you can't replicate how, when you feel an anger towards something or you feel an emotion towards something, that's when you're most likely to act and to stand up for them. So it was a tough one, because if you had an hour free in Edinburgh and you're going to go watch something, it's like, whoa, hello, okay, I now feel a lot of things, and I've got to go watch a stand-up, do some really like bad stand-up to 3 people in a sweaty room after this. And
I think we actually went to the Meadows and watched some circus. So I think that was
detox.
That was how we saw. But it was beautiful. It was really, really good, and it definitely shifted how I approached the Edinburgh Fringe. I'd been a few times before, but I think I'd always gone for that like levity and that comedy, and then actually like seeing like Wood Hill and some of Alex of the Picks last year, I was like, oh no, I need to like, there's more to this, and it really helped me sort of engage deeper. So it was great.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thanks. Yeah, and that's been a real stomping ground for us. As we started as a company as students. We've just celebrated our 10-year anniversary as a company, but the Fringe, I mean, I don't think you can do this anymore, but we used to literally like get Matt's dad to put stuff in the back of a van and drive up, and we would fundraise for it through really bad pub quizzes and things like that. And then it would be the kind of springboard to the work, being able to then tour and the wider messages. And I hope that there's still a place that students can have that, because that's a whole other podcast in itself. But the way that the industry is so tough at the moment in terms of funding, but I definitely, those pockets and corners of the fringe where people are really there to shout about a thing, as well as being about the play. It's like, what's the thing around it? What's the world around it? That's how we've kind of always viewed it.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think as well, I always come back to this question with my students, because I'm a teacher and we talk a lot about Shakespeare's tragedies and tragedies in the modern world. And we always think, well, why do we go and watch tragedies? Why do we do that for ourselves? And ultimately, it comes down to that element of curiosity, doesn't it? And, you know, we are naturally curious beings and we want to know about other people's experiences and lives. And then I think it's got that layer of, when you realise that this is real life, real experiences, you guys have actually taken this straight from the victims' kind of mouths, there's that real uncomfort, isn't there? That discomfort of, gosh, it almost makes you want to take action. So what a fantastic way of going about that. I just think that's, absolutely brilliant. So like, hats off to you for doing that work, because I bet that's really hard for you to process as well. Kind of having to take those things and then transform it onto the stage. I imagine that's quite a heavy task.
It's weirdly, it's a harder job for the audience, I think, than it is for me, because I get all of the fun and all of the benefits of, we never have a project that isn't just completely led by laughter. And I think people are always surprised when they meet me and Matt if they've known the shows first, because the shows are, you know, really political and angry and sincere, and that is not the process that we go on with the people that the shows are about. So I'm really privileged, and I have my life completely changed every time we do a project through the people that we meet. And I think it's such a hopeful thing, like the plays of what they're about are systems that are oppressing people, but I always think that speaks volumes. If systems are oppressing people, then it's like concrete over soil that has flowers wanting to grow. Like, it shows that the people ultimately are good. And I think exactly what you've just said, the thing I, every time we do a show, remember is that people ultimately want human connection. They want to feel, full stop. Like, we want to be able to feel someone else's experience. And that there's a real privilege and honour to that, to bearing witness to someone else's experience. And I think the thing that makes us apathetic is when we can't access those feelings, when we see something, but we don't have a connection to it. We don't have access to how it feels. And I think as soon as you're able to feel it, it unlocks something in people where you feel like, oh, I now feel like I can be a part of this. I deserve a place at the table to be part of the action, to support the change or to support this person or whatever it is. Because otherwise, it feels I get like fake, I guess. If we've not experienced the feeling first, it feels disingenuous. So I'm very lucky that I get to feel all day, every day with the work I'm always feeling, and that's a real privilege.
Yeah,
amazing. That's really, really beautiful. I guess I was going to ask, like, how do you sort of look after yourself with this? Like, you say it's a privilege, but it still is probably quite like I mean, I write quite political poetry, and I know it can be quite an emotional thing. Is there like anything that you sort of, after 10 years, that you have to put in place to look after yourselves and communities that you work in?
Yeah, we have a wellbeing coordinator, Ruth, who is just the best human in the world, and she's attached to us as a company and to every project. She's a qualified counsellor therapist, but she's also an arts practitioner by background. So she does loads of arts workshops with us and the people that we work with, but also the cast. That's the production teams that actually are very short term put together, asked to kind of hold and honour this huge thing, and then disbanded. And I think they're our kind of biggest, the people that we support the most, because the relationship with the groups that we work with carry on. So like with the Woodhill families, we still meet once a month and we're still connected, and we get that's really the well-being support. And a big part of that group, and all the groups really, we have these sort of three circles, which is the political action, the show, but then well-being. And those three things always must exist and are kind of sometimes intersecting, but always exist. And we try and remember that that's also the case for us as well. But like I say, like, it's just joy. Like, it is joy most front and foremost, mostly joy in the people, because you never don't have that. People, when they're speaking, always are speaking with the main objective to reassure you as the listener, I think. And that's one of the things we sometimes extract from the verbatim in order to make it more dramatic, is all the caveats to make you feel okay when they're telling you something. And so, but we get all the caveats in real life of those human connections with the people that we work with. So we have a good time, I would say. Yeah, it's not a harrowing experience. Definitely get the angry thing at the system though. Like, totally agree with you. I feel like we're a bit fucked, aren't we? It's a bit shit.
Yeah.
But am I allowed? Sorry, mum and dad. Am I allowed to? But the best solution to that ever is the things that you can do in your everyday life, and that gives a lot of meaning to me. So very lucky.
That's really beautiful. That's really, really good. Do you want to? Are you on to it? Yeah.
No, it's
okay, it's me. This is one I threw in because I thought it was really interesting. What do you wish more people knew about Lung's work?
Yeah, great. I guess like I touched on it a bit in terms of the Fringe, the Edinburgh Fringe. I guess it's what I wish people knew more about the arts in general, is how commodified it has become. I mean, particularly theatre, but definitely also television, film, radio, everything. I mean, the world, because of neoliberalism, serves down, like everything has to have a value, a monetary value. And that is shaping every story that we're hearing in terms of what is on stage and what is in the West End and what is on the television. And I really, in my heart, just really believe that we are then shaped by those. I mean, I'm sure you agree because we're all writers and artists, but we are then shaped by the stories that we hear, even when we're really resisting it. I want the legs of the women on Selling Sunset, okay? I want to be wearing stilettos and selling massive houses, because if you absorb that enough, you see things, and as humans, we see other people and we want to somehow assimilate to them. So I guess I just wish that the whole industry wasn't built on ticket sales and bums on seats and this kind of, I guess the thing that's most frustrating at the moment, it's not the bums on seats actually, because like we want people to go and see things. That's the whole point. You want people to have an experience and be being told the stories they want to hear. But it's the low risk, because when money is involved, everybody is risk averse. That's the biggest problem that we've got. And I always think of it like when you're cooking tea, and if you're cooking something low risk for tea, then that is going to not be delicious. You're going to be cooking something that will feed you and that will give you fuel and that will do the job, but you're not going to be, if you're not taking a risk, then you're not going to be, it's not going to be pleasurable, I guess. It's not going to be life-changing. It's not going to be connecting. And so you want people to be, it's not the art that's just like some random person pooing on the floor and standing and getting angry at the, when people tear up the phone book or whatever and 3 people are in the audience. I'm not pro like that abstraction of art to the point that it's not accessible to just normal people. But I wish the industry could see that there is value in these stories, because if you look at like the post office scandal, how surprised television executives were by how well that did blows my mind, because of course that is the story people want to hear. It's relatable. It's about a thing that impacts all of us. It's about humanity and it's real life, and it's about politics of the day. Like I feel like executives and theatre producers see the worst in the quote unquote consumers that come and see art. And it's why you still have things like Shakespeare being so loved, because it allows us to present stories that then we do relate to now. Like we relate them to the politics of now and to our everyday lives, because that's what people want to do. And there's this myth that people want escapism to the point of like, I don't know, 222. I don't want to be rude about that show because that's actually quite a good show, but like complete celeb casting, just like just risk averse, really bland pasta for tea.
It's like pantos that invite random soap stars to come on, and like fair play to them. Like I'd love to be a panto. The thing is, I want to be a panto dame, and I know that is never on the cards for me. I accept it. But like it is that kind of like sort of filling it out and making something safe.
100%. And pantos do really well when they are political. Like pantos can be political and comment on, and people love that, like the laughter in the audience when you make a joke about Brexit or when you present an allegory that's actually about the cost of living. Like people want to feel. It's what I come back to before, like they want to feel because it relates to something they agree with or that they recognize. And yeah, so I guess long-winded way of saying, I wish someone would commission me to do a show in the if any producer listening to this, put me in the West End.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad you have such confidence in our podcast. Wide mainstream appeal, but
of course.
No, it's good and it's important. I mean, we live and work in well, you don't live in Huddersfield anymore, but we, and you live in Barnsley, living in the north, and like people are so worn out. I remember going to a Burns night meal with an ex who was in academia, and they were talking about the fact with all these academic friends, the local library was closing, and they were railing against the fact that no one in the local community could do anything. And I was just sat there and I was like, you guys work in academia, which is hard, but these are people who are working 2 or 3 jobs and picking their kids up from childcare and looking after elderly relatives, and they don't have time. They probably are sad the library's closing, but they don't have time to challenge that, because even signing a petition means that they might need to have like Wi-Fi access or time or energy, and they just don't have. And I didn't think it that revolutionary, but it went down like a lead balloon. Like
wow.
It was a really interesting moment where I was like, had real clarity on the sort of environment I was in, and I was like, okay, you have no idea.
It's like talking to a different species or something.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I definitely think that about the living in Barnsley. It's so interesting how the perception as well from outside of like, oh, like you're doing some sort of like social good by living somewhere that isn't London. It shows how much dehumanizing has happened. And I think that's the thing again with the arts, is like people I just had to write this article actually about like the arts and education, because we're part of the National Drama do this campaign for every child should deserve arts education, which just makes me so how are we still making the case for this? Because but I realised like recently, because there's been this this review has happened into oracy, so the idea of, well, you'll know if you're a teacher sort of speaking to each other in school.
Well, they just don't want to do it. Kids don't want to do it at all these days. They're not encouraged to do it. So it's like,
yeah. And again, it feels like the levelling up thing of like, there's this sudden realisation that people don't have something like the skill of talking to each other. And it's like how you can't recognise it's because you have dehumanised curriculum systematically over a decade. And then we're really surprised that people don't communicate, because we've not taught through communication. We've taught through these weird tick boxes that aren't actually about humans. And it's the same with the arts. Like everyone in a position of power or luxury or privilege accesses the arts, values the arts, even if they don't necessarily call it that or realise that. Like that we all agree that the arts is a human natural. It's our first go-to, is to tell stories and to watch telly and to play parlour games or whatever. And this idea that some people don't get to access that is just evidence that we've completely dehumanised them, and that the only thing we care about is the commodification of children in schools, for example, where you don't have arts anymore because we need them to pass X, Y, and Z in order to get them onto the weird supply chain where there aren't any jobs anyway. So let them have a good time, making a play.
Yeah,
exactly. So
it's so frustrating as well. I think you've just completely hit the nail on the head there. And it's definitely something that's happened over the past 10 years, and it's just so frustrating. And the kids now look at creative subjects and are just so put off by them because they don't see them as creative anymore. So in English, for example, I mean, English is creative, it's a creative subject, and yet they can't stand it because, like you say, it's all tick boxes, and everything is taught in such a it's through the lens of that exam they're going to be sitting in year 11, because that's going to define their lives and their futures. And it's turned into a type of currency, the qualifications that you get. There's no fun there at all. And I entered into teaching because I wanted to change that. And then you realise as a teacher, when you get into it, it's such a huge problem that actually, where do you even begin? Your hands just feel tied. It's really frustrating.
And also you as a human being, as a teacher, are also being funneled through this like extraction of fun and play and arts. And that's also like dehumanizing the teachers, because their daily lives, they don't get to do the thing that is natural impulse, which is to teach through play. Like that's how we learn, is through trying different outcomes and through imagination. And you're being forced to teach in this weirdly extracted way that doesn't fit your humanity.
Absolutely.
Like, that's exhausting.
And the result is, it's like what you've said, then we've got a generation of children who just have no confidence at all, and they don't want to speak to each other, they don't want to make their voices heard. Like in English, we always try to encourage debates, and we put these real issues on the board that are really juicy, want them to get the teeth into it, and they feel silence. They feel like, I don't know, they can't express that opinion. And so it's really reassuring to know that people kind of like you and your company still exist, because that's just an opportunity for them to actually realise how far their voice could go, and actually, what good it could do. Because I don't think they realise that these days, that their voice counts and it matters. And yeah. Anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm very off piece.
No,
I've got a lot I can say about this.
I agree with everything you said. I just want to get a big t-shirt that says "I agree." I agree.
One of my greatest joys of this podcast is that we've tried to pick guests evenly, but because of the work I've been doing outside of schools, I've been bringing more to them. But I'm often like, "Here, Hannah, this is a person you will enjoy." There's a few moments where I'm just sat there like watching a tennis match, just being like, yes, it's working.
Your matchmaking, podcast matchmaking.
Absolutely, such a joy. Yeah. But yeah, just to pull us back on track.
Right.
Another question I'm really excited about. We touched on before your experience as an actor, which has really been lovely to see. I was really intrigued at how that experience has influenced the work you make, both as a writer and a director, because you've kind of been sandwiched in that in the middle place.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess, like I said at the beginning, I always like to think the three really intersect, but actually I've realised, like, in auditions, I pretend that all I do is I act, because when I was writing this play called Trojan Horse. It was about Birmingham Trojan Horse Affair with lots of teachers and governors anyway, you can Google it. There's a really good This American Life podcast on it. But I was writing that, and I was so in the world of it that whenever I would go to an audition and they'd ask what I was up to, I would end up just telling them about this horrendous thing that was happening in Birmingham, and how all this huge Islamophobia and these teachers and governors being silenced. And it wasn't until like the third audition, when I saw the casting director's eyes glaze over, that I realised I was just doing the wrong thing, and I needed to go back to pretending that I've just been sitting at home waiting for you to call me. Yeah. So I guess, like, on a practical level, they do not intersect. I have to decompartmentalize. Yeah. But obviously, just as an artist, they massively do. I think I'm really lucky in the writing. Often writing is kind of going inwards and thinking, and I mean, that is useful in itself. But then also I get this experience through the work that we do of just meeting loads and loads of people, and every time you meet a person, it's great research for who humans are and how they work, and that really feeds into my acting. I think in terms of directing, so I don't direct plays. I direct, so I always get people think that I do, which is great because I can take all the credit for our shows. But I'm the co-director of the company in the most boring sense, that I do the monthly management accounts and quarterly strategy and papers for the board. So I'm the director of admin. But I think in terms of the acting and writing, they intersect massively in terms of how I then practically apply both, because I learn so much from both. And then also just really practically, when I'm in the position of the company, I really understand the experience the actors are having, and the insecurities. Like, never underestimate the insecurities. That's something I've realised, having been on the other side of it, because I can see that you're really good at acting, but I know that you don't feel it. And then I'm like, but why not? And then I go into the role of being an actor. I'm like, oh, because it's horrifically exposing, and you have to just kind of trust that you're not going to really embarrass yourself. And then the other thing, I guess, is, oh my God, my brain has completely gone off. What was I going to say? Acting, writing, acting. I don't know. It's gone. It's like a light bulb. It's switched off.
No, it's fine. If it comes back to you, it's fine.
Oh, I know what it was. The practical thing, just on a logistical, just logistically, is that you don't have any control as an actor. And that's part of where the insecurity comes from, I guess, is that I will always act if somebody gives me a job. But you can write any time and you can't act any time. And even when I've been my absolute busiest as an actor, I've been so lucky that there have been times when I've been, working, always in work. But even when you're in work, you feel like you're not as an actor, because you are so at someone else's mercy and you don't know what's coming next. And also, if you're doing telly, you're mostly sat in your trailer anyway. They're paying you to sit, and there's nothing worse than sitting with your thoughts. So sit with a pen. That's what I've learned to do.
Yeah.
Sit with a pen.
A good outlet.
Yeah. When you're writing plays and you're working, like, for example, Trojan Horse, were you able to like act it out or read it as a character, or were you still like in that brain of the writer writing for other actors?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question that I've not thought about.
Sorry, I just was like, just threw that
No,
out.
no, well, it's really interesting because so I often write with Matt, who I run the company with, and he is a really visual thinker. So he then directs the plays, and that's been so useful because it means as we're writing, he is going, but how is that practically going to apply on stage? And that's not how I think at all. I think in words and emotions and feelings, and I don't know what I'm imagining really, but I'm definitely not imagining a space with black curtains. Like I'm imagining some sort of weird, like, I don't know, multiverse in my mind where like people are vegetables or something. I don't know. I'm like not imagining literal practical space. So I guess maybe that is acting, is like I'm accessing always through writing some sort of like deep human drive of like why someone is saying something and doing something. And I guess that is also how the two intersect, is when you're writing, you need to say every line needs to be about how you're moving something forward. There's always a reason someone is speaking, even if it's to fill the space and fill time, like that's because they're anxious about space being left or something. There's just always a reason. No one's just speaking for the sake of speaking. And it's the same with acting. You have to find the reason that someone is speaking. And so I suppose when I'm writing, I'm probably trying to make the actor's job as easy as possible. I'm always thinking about that motivation and the why, which I think a lot of writers do anyway. But I probably am trying to access, how that feels and how that character would feel. But I definitely don't do, if we're going to do like a reading of something, I 100% make other people do that, because you also can't. Well, I know people do write and act, Phoebe Waller-Bridge and people, but I just find that you have to have that outside perspective and those outside voices to really, like a mirror, you don't know you've got food on your face till someone holds something up to show you. And so I need the actors to show me I've got food on my face.
Yeah, that's really, I love that.
It's a really good way of putting it, actually, yeah. And I think that, that relates a lot to what we've talked about in this podcast. Sometimes you don't realise until someone reads your work back to you what's not working. And definitely from a novel writing perspective, and from a poetry kind of perspective, that definitely resonates.
Well, even playwriting, you're working your play at the minute and Ben's reading it for you.
Yeah, he keeps reading it back to me. Yeah. I think that's it.
So
you have to hear it. You almost see it through a different lens, don't you? Because, you realise actually that doesn't sound as great as I thought it did. I need to completely retweak that bit. And
100%. I think there's two types of writing. I think there's writing as self-care, and then there's writing as empathy, like the practical application of empathy. And I think that you have to do the first to do the second. So exactly what you just said, this article I was talking about that was about why Key Stage 3 should have drama in their classrooms or whatever it was that I was saying. I wrote this article and Matt read it and he was like, this does not make any sense. And I realised it's because I hadn't done the second one yet. I'd done the writing as self-care and I knew what it meant. But you then have to make the bridge, because just like how you don't really think, I think the proper thinking you do is in between words. So you know always what you mean by the words, because the words come out to explain the thinking and the feeling behind it. But you have to find a bridge to, when you've like made assumptions about everybody else having been on a certain journey, to then understand the words that you're putting on the page or that come out, you have to not assume that people have been on that journey. And so my article, the first draft, was assuming that everybody had been on my journey and therefore wasn't allowing the act of empathy, the access into why I thought the way that I did. And it's really boring. It's so boring to then rewrite it, because you feel like you're explaining really obvious things and you're putting in these bridges to be like, did you know? And it's like, but actually genuinely to access like and understand someone's internal deepest thoughts, we have to create bridges that feel really obvious to us, because our internal world doesn't need explaining to us, which is why the first act of writing as self-love is the best thing ever, because you're just writing for you and you don't need to explain it to anybody else. But I think that act of empathy then to allow people in is just a brilliant thing that you can do. So I love that you get people to read it and tell you don't make any sense.
And that happens. quite often.
Me too.
But it's brilliant because last week we spoke to Matt Abbott and he was talking about writing poetry for people, not poets. And that, first of all, what a great catchphrase, but also very similar that, you know, that sort of like taking the distance to actually write for people and not poets, including yourself, in the same way for you writing as self-care and then into empathy, that shift in perspective.
I love that, because it also helps you realise, it helps you understand the reader isn't on the same journey, and it's an act of empathy to them, but also to you, to go, oh my gosh, actually, and with the poets thing, there's so much stuff, when I write poetry or whatever, or anything, you forget that people aren't in your world, and it's really helpful to remember that. And I so understand why people end up creating the tearing up of the phone book and the pooing on the stage, because they've gone on the journey of why they're doing that, and it's boring to explain that to everybody else. But being boring is also like, it's unkind to not allow people in, I guess. So I love that, writing for people, not poets. Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna steal it.
Do it.
Yeah. So we've got just a few more questions left. I think this one's quite a heavy one, so feel free if you need a few minutes to think about it. But what's the biggest lesson that you have learned from your work?
Wow. Yeah, big existential component. I mean, I learned so much in every project that's really different. Really practically, like I always end up becoming like an expert in a really niche thing, like we all do. If you write about something that's particularly based on real life, you either become an expert in the characters that you create, don't you, or you become an expert. Like I can't tell you how much I knew about education policy when I was writing Trojan Horse, or how much I knew about the social education system for children when I was writing Our Last Show, the Children's Inquiry. And then it's a bit like revising your GCSEs, where some of it sticks and some of it is definitely gone forever. So I don't always carry that through, but a lot of it I do, and that's fact. Like I know such niche things, and I'm really lucky to know niche things about those corners of the world because of about the prison system, because of the work. But I think maybe like a bigger, more profound thing. I was thinking about this the other day actually, because I read Naomi Klein. I can never remember if it's Naomi or Naomi, and I know she gets really grumpy when people get it wrong. But anyway, one of those. She's written this book called Doppelganger, which I really, really recommend. It's a non-fiction book about how everything's terrible. Well, it's about conspiracy theories and the mirror world, and it's really excellent. But she talks about ideology and how when you say you have an ideology, you're saying that you've kind of got a set, fixed position on something, and that's saying that you're immovable, and also that you kind of know it all, like you've decided and it's this forever. And I think I used to think that I had an ideology, and I realised it's not that. It's that I have values that I can then apply and can be malleable. But the biggest thing I think I've learned is that, side note, I went to the Natural History Museum, and there's this thing on the wall that says the only thing certain is change, because like the universe was literally constructed in an explosion, and the ground we're stood on is literally moving tectonic plates. And this kind of weird human lie that we tell ourselves, that there is going to be a set thing, we're like, and then I'll get married, or then I'll buy my house, and then I'll become an adult, and then I'll be set and fixed in one position. And I think ideology is the same. It's like a way of trying to self-comfort that there is some permanency. And I guess that's been the biggest lesson, is that there isn't any. There is no permanency. And I used to find that scary, but I've recently found that amazing, because if you say the only thing certain is change, then there's a certainty in that. There's an excitement in that you remain the same and your values can remain the same. But the way that they interact with the world changes, and just every person you meet, and particularly if I'm very lucky that I meet people who've had really different experiences and journeys, and it's so like silly, but you kind of forget that like there are so many different ways of living this life, and that there are so many different experiences that shape who people are and why people are. And I guess that's been the biggest thing, is that, like I said earlier, I genuinely have my life changed every time we do a show. And even like I'm now sort of getting into a bit more like writer's room sitcom-y stuff, which is much less like profound on the big politics level, but there's little politics in that, in trying to make people laugh. And even with that, like you just always have the capability to have your perceptions changed. So it's not a very articulate thing to say, and it's kind of probably quite an obvious thing to say, but I do think that would be the key to kind of loads of stuff if more humans were comfortable with shift and with change, because it's inevitable.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Sorry, we talk a lot about the fact that the world feels so heavy these days because we're just consuming so much information that in the past we'd just never know about. And I think that's it. We see so much change, we witness so much change, and we feel responsible as well for the vast majority of it too. And or the fact that we can't make a change, and we just have such emotion just constantly just bubbling away within us, that I think quite often we do want that comfort blanket of stability and steadiness and calm, but in actual fact that stops us from progressing, doesn't it, and adapting as human beings. Because if you're not going to put yourself out there and embrace that change, in actual fact, you're never going to have any stories to tell. You're never going to have any experience in life, are you? But the world's an intimidating place, isn't it? So it's I know exactly what you mean. You need to just embrace it. You have to accept that this is the world we live in, this is life, and you've got to just ride that wave, haven't you?
Yeah. Get a surfboard.
Yeah, that's surfing, kids.
That feels like a wonderful inspirational poster. Like,
embrace the
way
a picture of me just screaming and crying through life. Yeah,
absolutely.
But listen, you must also have stability. That it's like, you know, I will always like peanut butter, and that if I need her comfort, and I think that's it. It's finding the stability to feel safe is really important for the human experience. So I don't want to be like, and then just be a nomad and run around and have your mind changed every day. And like, also, I think people, like friends who listen to this, would think that I was bullshitting you because I have very fixed positions on things. But I know that I have the ability to change my mind on that if somebody is persuasive enough. It's just that they've not been. So like, it's not that you don't have a strong opinion. And I always think this is the thing about empathy as well, where like people think having empathy with another perspective is somehow weakening your own position on something. Whereas I view it as strengthening your own position. If you feel what they feel and you understand why they've come to the conclusion they have, but you still don't agree with them, like that's the strongest feeling ever. And I love to practice empathy in that way of like, let me understand genuinely where you're coming from with this. And it's the best way of writing characters that you don't agree with. Let's present the best argument against what I actually think, and then I still am unchanged by you in my position, but I have understood why you've got to where you've got to, which is a really humanizing experience.
I think that's beautiful. I think you've given us so many like little nuggets to reflect.
It's so earnest and wanky. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great.
We should talk about farts in a minute.
Well, I'm about to ask a second quite heavy question, really, because we think that the work we do is important with Inkspill, and it's the reason we keep doing it. And in the same way, the work that Lung does and the work you're doing through that is beautiful and important. And I guess the thing I really was like sort of curious about is asking you, what does the future of, I put literary or theatrical activism look like to you? What do you see in the future?
Wow. I mean, sort of death, I think, probably. No, I think, what do I think? What does the future of activism, literary activism look like? I guess my instinct is to always go to the centre of things, and we do that a lot with Lung, of like, what policy are we asking for and how are we trying to change things? But I think that actually the biggest change does still happen, and definitely in our productions, in the sort of local sense. So that might be the relationship you have between the novel you've written and the reader. It's not that you're asking necessarily for like, you know, please can we, I don't know, ban whatever. It's let me shift your perception a bit, or let me access how you think about things and help to see it from this different perspective. And I think that is always going to be the best way of changing anything. So I guess like I would say literary activism, all literature is activism. It's just like what voices we choose to activate, I guess. And then I always like to think of like arts as being two things. It's either a mirror that we're holding up food on your face, like reflecting back to the world, so you can see it and go, oh man, that's shit, or that's beautiful, and like you can genuinely see it, because you need to stand outside of it to see it fully. And then the other one is to present alternatives, to present a better world, or a different way of doing things, or a character that has values that you think should apply to everybody. And I think humans are just always going to do that. We're always going to make those two types of fiction or non-fiction, however you like to see it. So I feel really hopeful. I guess it just all comes back to that kind of like neoliberalism is going to get you. Well, it's already got us, and like we've commodified the arts, and it's really hard to be an artist if you're from any background that isn't inherited wealth. So that fucked us a bit. But having said that, you know, people like the concrete and the flowers, like, you know, people will push through and will always be trying to mark make and self-express. That's just always going to happen, even when the seas rise and we're all, you know, there's 3 people left sharing a potato. That's always gonna persevere, I think. So a mixture of existentialism and hope. Sorry, my waffly way. What do you guys think? You hope for me?
What do we? I don't think any guests have ever turned a question back on us, to be honest. So we're both a bit like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely, like, I'm noticing amongst the young people who I teach that they are very political, and I think it's because they're exposed to politics from a much younger age now through what they see and consume online. But I am so cautious of misplaced politics as well, because they're also heavily influenced by what they're seeing online. For example, I have a classroom full of kids who were for a period of time obsessed with Andrew Tate, and it's because they just didn't understand. And I think it's tricky, isn't it, because they're clearly curious and they're so impressionable, but I do worry sometimes that in actual fact they're just so vulnerable. And how do we help them and kind of encourage them to kind of form their own opinions rather than allowing themselves to just be so heavily influenced by others? So the future of literary activism, it's hard to say, because everyone wants to take action and be an activist, but are they doing it for the right reasons, because it's what they genuinely believe and think, or is it because of what others are telling them? Don't know. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think it comes back to that human connection thing of, like, ultimately people want to connect, but if that connection is steered in the wrong direction of, we're going to connect with these people against that person, which is so natural, but I like to view it that it's not coming, hate comes from a place of bonding, of our need to bond with other humans. And I think, like you say, just the internet is just the wild west at the moment, and particularly with young minds. I would be absolutely screwed if I'm so glad I'm a naughty kid with my MSN and my broadband plugged into the mum needs to make a phone call, so I'm not allowed the internet tonight. Like, I know my mind would be completely, it already has been, like, I've finally set a timer on my Instagram to stop consuming. Because you feel like it's so hard though, isn't it? You want to connect. That's what it is. It comes down to, I want to be connected to the rest of the world. Like, connect me. And this is such a drug for connecting me to everybody else. But I have no control over how that's shifting my thinking and my perception, and the long legs that I now want from selling sunset honeys that I absolutely obsessively follow on Instagram. Like, what is that doing to my brain? So exactly like you say, your kids, man, it's tough times out there.
It is.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think of
it? I think the thing I struggle with the most is just people's exhaustion. I think, like, just even look at the UK, how demoralised and downbeaten we are from years of austerity across, like, all levels. You know, we look at art, you look at benefits, and you look at immigration, and you look at sort of the refugee, I say crisis in like commas, they don't really agree with it. I think I wish people had the ability to shift their exhaustion into rage. I think we need rage. I think we saw that, and it's a different and horrific kind of rage, but through the race riots that we had most recently, I think that real mobilisation of people, vulnerable people who I think have been totally manipulated and taken advantage of, was really, really horrific to watch, but interesting to see what happened and what played out, and people who've been saying horrendous things online for years suddenly being amazed by the consequences of their actions. I was at the gym the other day, and my gym has these enormous screens that have BBC News or some kind of news running all the time. And it had the Conservative councillor's wife who's been jailed for like 31 months. And her defence was just so shocking that she could never have expected the outrage. And then you read the tweets she quotes. You read the tweet or whatever. I don't know what you call it on X anymore, but the stuff that she posted, and you're like, really? You didn't see that was horrendous? So I guess like you said, it's a entirely different podcast, but I want people to become a community and become angry and protest again, but actually for things and demand stuff for themselves as a community and for the betterment of us. And I think that in it ties back into your like the whole qualification and the lack of money to be angry and to tell those angry stories, in the sense of making activism protest a thing again. I mean, we've seen like protest laws coming in and stuff, so that was a very messy sort of like befuddlement of it. But I want people to be angry and to do something with that anger that's not against these like tiny percentages that we, you know, these minorities that we're being told to hate, and actually do something against the government that even now I'm watching them unpick stuff that is just, it's just horrendous.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. It feels too big, like it feels too horrendous to then, you know, it is exhausting. And so it's easy to direct your anger towards people that you can smack and that are near you and that you can throw a rock through their window. And I think that it will just create more division. And I completely agree with everything you said about how do we take the anger that is absolutely legitimate. You know, people have been just completely generations of, you know, in Barnsley, because I do there's a weekly group that we run at the college, and they were saying how sick they are of people talking about the mining community that was used to be a thriving town and now it's not. And they were like, but it didn't for us used to be a thriving town because the mines closed decades before we were born. Our experience is that it has always been shit, that it's like generations of unemployment, and this idea still of the narrative of it having become bad for them is not a reality. And I think like and like you're saying about your kids being political, that also excites me, because like, yes, let's shift the narrative there, let's change the language, because it's not worked to talk about how let down Barnsley has been by the mines closing, because that has happened, and generations now of unemployment have impacted the young people now that's tangentially linked to the mines closing down. And let's still honour that and have statues for that and talk about that, but in terms of like political action now, what are the kind of what's the language, what's the story that we're talking about to help sort of use narrative and use story as a way to understand how we're all experiencing the oppressions that are being put on us, that aren't just directing our anger in the wrong places.
Yeah, and finding community again, like uniting people and being a community and talking about things together and sharing the same space and not having that be an issue. So thank you for inventing that on us. That really was.
I love you grabbed your cup of tea. Like, yes, this will fix it. This cup of tea.
Almost mug that like we
every household has to have the giant Sports Direct.
Yeah, it's what Alex brought to our household.
And do you guys? I don't know where ours came from. Like, we have it, but I couldn't tell you how we got it.
It just appears. It's like a unification thing.
It's like who was that band? Was it U2 that just dropped their album into everyone's phone essentially?
Yeah.
Sports Director just coming around and filling our cups with mugs.
That's like Santa Claus for Sports Direct mugs. Very good.
Well, we've come to our final question, but if we could just chat to you all day, I feel like this has been a really nice way to spend a Saturday morning.
Yes, same. I totally agree. It's been so nice.
It has, but we always leave the kind of bombshell question till the end. We've kind of gathered throughout the year, through all the guests we've spoken to, a bit of a book recommendation list, and so we wondered what you'd like to add to that. What's your favourite book?
Yeah, absolutely horrific question. What a horrendous question. Just awful.
I know. Just sends everybody to a spiral every time.
Yeah, it's awful question. It's like, sum yourself up, but on crack, because how do you find your favourite book? I was like trying to think of like books that changed the world. Can I cheat and just like tell you my journey so that I can give you a couple of accidental recommendations? So like these are non-fiction, but Doppelganger by Naomi Klein has been a big one for me, and all the stuff we've been saying about commodification of the invisible doctrine of how neoliberalism is bad. That's a good book that is about neoliberalism being bad, thumbs down, but also like all the things we've been talking about. And it's changed my mind that the solution is local, that stop looking for the centre of trying to overthrow. I mean, let's overthrow stuff, but also you can create your own pockets of a brilliant community within your local world. And once you start looking for it, you realise that is what people are doing. Like humans seek to connect locally. Anyway, then so in terms of favourite book, it just feels horrific to put this on paper and be like, this is it, this isn't it. But we all do this, don't we? You go back to childhood and like formative books that you read when you were young. And for me, Angela Carter was like a huge figure. So basic bitch, sorry, but she was just like a very like a moment of it, that thing about the mirror of creating an alternative world. Like she's so imaginative with her writing. So then I had to whittle it down anyway, I'm going to go with Nights at the Circus. I just remember reading like all of her books really when I think I started when I was about 11 and probably too young, and one of opening a book with the teenage girl playing with her pubes in the mirror, and it just blew my mind that like that internal world was put into fiction in a way that like I felt like someone was coming and looking in my bedroom. And I just love her imagination and her flair for life. I guess there's like a joy in all of her books and a humanity in all of her books. So yeah, I'm gonna go for that one.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Really, really good. I love that, and it's nice having you unpick it as well. We like hearing what people actually like. I think especially as like people who read a lot, what are we actually liking rather than what are we reading?
I'm very nosy, and I think as well, like I always quite like it because people come with such different ideas and recommendations, and I'm like that. I always get a little bit of like, I know what you like as a person now because of the book you read, so I get a little bit psychological about it.
Yeah, it does. That's why it's such a horrendous question, because it feels like it says everything about you. And like I had lists of like things that I should pick, and there are better, no offense to Angela, what an absolute honey, but there are better books out there. But I guess just in terms of like what felt truthful in terms of a book that I will go back to access that little 11-year-old me having a formative experience. Yeah,
it's those ones that stick with you, isn't it? It's like sometimes you don't get to choose your favourite book, it chooses you, doesn't it?
I love that.
Whoa,
What a line. Mic drop.
My marketer brain, there's been so many good lines this episode. Thanks guys. So I'm like,
I'm going to print the t-shirts. I'm going to print all the t-shirts. But I think the winner t-shirt is still just I agree with you. Yes. I think that's simple and to the point.
It's been great.
It's been such a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you so much for
really lovely
me.
chatting.
What a blooming great way to spend a Saturday morning.
I know, she's fab, isn't she? It just feels so affirming to sit there and listen to her talk.
I came off that call and I just said, I could have talked to Helen for ages.
Alex will probably edit out. There's a lot of times where I'm like waiting to go in and Hannah's just like straight on it because she's got another question. I'm like, yeah, go for it, enjoy it.
I couldn't help it. You know when you just get someone who you just kind of click with and you're like, I want to know more about you. You seem interesting.
No, absolutely. I think it's also just nice having someone doing something in the north that is similar but different to what we're doing and making it happen. And her work is stunning. I really recommend looking into like if it's going on tour near you. Like I mentioned in the intro, I saw Trojan Horse being advertised, and I remember it because I'm pretty sure it was a big yellow poster with a girl with a hijab on. I'm pretty sure, and that's how much it stuck in my brain. If it's not now, I'll have to cut this out and pretend that it wasn't. But and seeing Woodhill last year was amazing, and really did transform how I approach the Fringe. Like the stuff I talked about last season with Rio, like it's inspired by like Alex taking me and challenging me and being like, no, you don't have to see comedians here. And that was brilliant for me because I feel stuff so deeply. I just don't want to be harrowed, but actually it's important to engage with stuff. I don't know if harrowed is a word.
Yeah. No.
Like twote.
Yeah, twote. Oh, no, it's just one of those, isn't it? But I know exactly what you mean. And I've never even thought about that process of kind of interviewing someone and then using that as a framework to form a play or a project. So yeah, God, I really, every time she was kind of mentioning some of the projects she's worked on, I was getting really angry at myself for not discovering her sooner and her work sooner, because I'm like, how have I missed that? I would have loved to have seen that. So yeah, I really do hope she puts some of these shows on again so I can actually see them. Yeah, because I didn't know they existed.
I know you don't, but that's what I love. I love this journey, just finding all these people who do so amazing, such amazing work. And I'm enjoying like meeting all these people who are doing such amazing work, but on like smaller local scales. And like Helen's is touring like nationally, and Matt's stuff is well known, and Rio's going to London to Camden People's Theatre and stuff. And we've got people, but at the end of the day, it's also people who are just like encourage our community, like Alice in their first season running workshops with people to help them like figure out how to write and express themselves. It's just gorgeous. We're just having a great time. But that it's the verbatim theatre thing. I think I'm using that for my creative task this week.
Yeah,
I think I like the idea of interviewing someone about something. I don't know if it's going to be family or friends. I don't know who I'm going to talk to, but I'm going to go and actually interview someone, use that as a foundation for like writing something and using their words to write it, because that's so important that it's their experience. I'm thinking my granddad, I wish he was still here. My mum's dad died 2017.
Right.
I had dementia, but he kept telling a story about he was in the military police, and it's like this mad story. The reason I remember is because he said it so many times, but basically it was World War II, I think, and everyone wanted to go to, or post World War II, I don't know. It was a war, and everyone wanted to go to Germany to get the cheap cameras. That's exactly what he said. And it was like 200 military police, and 180 of them are going to Germany, and 20 of them are going to Malay. And he went to Malay, number 20. And he talks about like sending home care packages full of oranges and getting like silk shirts handmade and stuff. And it's just beautiful. And I regret being, you know, a grumpy late teen who has her own problems and not writing more of it down. And we've just lost my great uncle as well, my nan's younger brother, my uncle Brian, and I regret not having more stories of him. So I think that's, finding someone and hearing their story and making it into something, or at least starting the process of making it into something.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best thing you can do. Whilst I was at uni, to get me through financially, I used to write autobiographies. I was a ghostwriter.
I didn't know that.
That's what I've told you this before. I don't know. Maybe
I think you have.
Yeah, well, I was a ghostwriter. I did it for about 2 years. And basically the process was we interviewed them, then the interviews got sent to me, then I would write it up into a story, into a narrative, and then give it back to them, and then they could publish as many of the copies as they wanted.
This is so cool.
It was such a good job. I enjoyed it so much. It was so interesting, just because I'm really nosy. It was so really, really interesting. I got to know some fantastic people through writing about their lives, and you just become so inspired by it. And even now I take inspiration from that, from their experiences. It
makes so much sense reading your novel. That
it
makes so much sense.
I remember I once did one about a woman who set up in the 1960s like the OG Anne Summers sex toy industry business, and she would go around to women's houses whilst the husbands were out at work and sell them like things to help with their sex life, because things such as like lubricants and women's pleasure, there wasn't anything kind of on the market for them at that time, so she created things and sold them.
This is amazing.
And she was just this very unsupposing little old lady, and in actual fact she'd had this really colourful past, and I would have never have known that unless she'd have come forward and said, I'd like to write about my life before I pop off. And that's just I did that for a while, and it is so inspiring. You have no idea what depth people have to them, and so 100%. I think that's a fantastic creative project.
Oh, thank you.
And you don't need to go far for that, do you? You could literally even bring a parent or a friend, or someone who you just kind of like, tell me more about yourself, because do I know everything? Like, have I got all the stories?
No, definitely. I think that's interesting. I think maybe my history is my nan, because I know about my granddad's history, but I don't really know much about my nan. So nice to, she's my last remaining grandparent, so it feels like should make a bit of a fuss of her, really.
People
which is great.
Are far more, they're so unsupposing, aren't they? They're far more interesting than you think they are. So
well, it's like you keep throwing out things, and I'm just like, oh, okay.
I don't know if I would have mentioned it. It's all on my LinkedIn.
Oh, I didn't even follow you on LinkedIn.
Oh, I just wouldn't. I hate LinkedIn. Anyway, that's another.
Earle is not on LinkedIn.
I'm not. Actually, thank God.
I did add it to my work history recently, you know.
Well, yeah, but definitely.
Because it's a lot of work.
on your CV, but oh God, no, I remember the days of LinkedIn. That was when I was trying to actually, like, make it after uni, and I was like, why am I doing this? This is a very depressing platform to be on.
Yeah. And now everything's written by AI, which is another podcast entirely. So how about you? What did Helen really, I mean, I feel like she truly jingled your jammies. This episode.
It's saying, isn't it?
It's just fun.
It's I was really inspired by something she said literally, I think, in the opening moments of the podcast today, when she was talking about how she really likes having a form, and she writes to form a lot, because in actual fact that's quite comforting for her. If she has a form, she kind of has freedom within the form and can get quite experimental in that sense. I've always been very anti-form. I don't format my poems at all. I don't like being told it must follow the rhyme scheme, it must have this many syllables. But then in actual fact, I was at a workshop and we had to write haikus, and I was like, actually, this is quite nice. It was like a gap fill. So maybe my creative project this week might be, for your future projects or your next project, why not try and write to a form? Do a bit of research on some different forms,
find
and
some
see
weird ones.
Yeah, some wacky ones. I think that's it. I don't want to write traditional sonnets. I don't want to write, there are some pretty interesting things out there.
Owen did some haikus last week at Inksville or something, didn't he?
But it was a different type of. Yeah, he did. It was a different though, wasn't it? It was almost like an inversion of a haiku. It was bizarre.
He's fun. He always plays with form. I feel like he's good at.
Well, we've got quite a few people at Inksville who I think are very form driven, so maybe I'll speak to them and kind of, get, because I don't know many. I think that's it as well.
No, like, so off the top of my head, it's like sonnet, haiku, limerick.
And like meter as well. I don't really speak about meter much. I'm not really into that, but I think with meter that comes more into performance poetry, doesn't it? And
we'll get you writing some slam poetry soon.
I don't know about that. But yeah, so maybe that's what I'm going to do this week. See how freeing form can be.
Yeah. I love that. Before we sign off, should I quickly touch on the final guest of Spilling Ink?
Yes, definitely.
Both of this season and of the project, which is insane. So next week we're gonna venture into sort of untrod territory for us. We're gonna have a video game writer with us. Jeremy, I believe his name is Malul, but I will confirm pronunciation, who is a wonderful game writer who I've been working with. Well, I say working with, he's been mentoring me for the last year and a half. He's based over in LA, so he's also our first, I believe, international.
Oh gosh, we made it in America.
Yes.
Is he American?
He is American.
Wow, that's going to be so exciting.
That's it. Not game writing. In fact, he's American.
Oh, jelly-legged.
Did really? He's wonderful. He's been great. He is a game writer, but he's also worked in I believe board games, and he is also writing a screenplay.
Oh wow, right.
So
great.
He's right for the plucking of lots of really interesting information.
I think game writing is such a great thing that we haven't tapped into and explored, is it? Like that's a whole entirely different kettle of fish that is something people could break into as well. So yeah, good guest.
I know. I'm really looking forward to it. And it was something I was really passionate about making sure we had on the podcast, because I love video games. My partner works in them, so I know a lot of game people. And also this year's been really hard for people in games because there's been a lot of layoffs, a lot of redundancies, a lot of studios closed down. And I think I just want to highlight like the skill that goes into creating things. So he's gonna be, I have no doubt he's gonna be wonderful. And that will be our final guest. And then they'll all being well, Bobby stays in, we'll have a episode 5 to seal off the season.
And, yes. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Coolio. Right, well, we'll love you and leave you. We'll see you all next week, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, and big thanks to Helen for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. It's amazing.
It was great. Right, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.